All right, well, hello, my name is John Kenyon. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature Organization, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today, where we will hear from Anna Barker about part one of the Brothers Karamazov. This will be the first of what promises to be several Zooms that we will be doing over the course of this project through December. And so we'll have a lot of opportunity to talk about this book and different aspects of the publication. So I will again ask that if you have questions, as we have said, you can raise your hand or you can put those into the chat and we will get those asked of Anna. And also, as she had mentioned, she won't be able to answer everything because you might have some spoiler questions. So we'll be getting to those in future Zooms. And this will be posted online so you can watch it again or share with friends that they can watch this if they didn't have the opportunity to join us live. And so now I am going to turn things over to Anna, who will be leading us through our discussion. So thank you very much. And Anna, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm deeply humbled by the outpouring of support for my outpourings for Dostoevsky. So welcome, everyone. And I just noticed that we are joined by everyone from New York to California and Michigan to Texas. And I see faithful companions from Australia and from Brazil who are joining us today. So it's just absolutely remarkable. Welcome, everyone. And as John pointed out, we need all the help in the world with this novel. So those of you who were with me for the War and Peace journey last spring, do you remember how many times I mentioned in my preliminary notes in August and even at the beginning of our discussion of the chapters starting on September 1st that this is not War and Peace. And all of you are realizing by now, this is not War and Peace at all. It has nothing in common with War and Peace. And I always point out to all of my students that my favorite book of criticism is called Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. It's by George Steiner, and I can't recommend it enough. I think it's the best book of criticism ever written because George Steiner did not insinuate himself into the discussion. He exposed his beautiful intellectual genius in his discussion of Dostoevsky's and Tolstoy's totality, but he didn't make it about himself. He made it about these two giants of Russian literature, and I'm eternally grateful to him. And he basically puts these two in the context of world literature, starting with Greek and Roman tones and all the way into the 20th century, and all of the authors such as Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, Hemingway, Catherine Mansfield, all of the 20th century authors who were influenced by Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. So remember, there is no and in that title. It's either or. It's either Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. They are completely incompatible. And those of you who have been reading my notes in August, you probably realized that Tolstoy and Dostoevsky never met. They never walked into the same room together. They never talked to each other. And it's, for someone like me, the absurdity of it never ceases to amaze me because they lived in the same cities. They revolved in the same circles. They had the same publisher. As a matter of fact, in 1866, Tolstoy's War and Peace was serialized in the Russian Messenger, edited by Katkov, at the same time as Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment is serialized in the same magazine, which is absolutely remarkable. So just pretend that you are Russian subscribers to the Russian Messenger in 1866, and every month a new issue shows up, and in every issue you have the continuation of War and Peace and the continuation of Crime and Punishment. It's every reader's dream come true. But the two authors never ever met. So I always tell my students, especially if they are in writers' workshops or in drama writing workshops, that someday they have to promise that they will write a play that will be the supposed conversation that Tolstoy and Dostoevsky had. And in order to write that well, or if some of you are playwrights out there, I do not write. The only thing that I do is offer pithy remarks about various parts of various novels that I absolutely love. So if any of you are playwrights, please write that play. It will be phenomenal. But in order to do it justice, you will have to read everything that Tolstoy and Dostoevsky have written. The collected works of Tolstoy on the shelves of the University of Iowa Library are 90 volumes. It's 90. Dostoevsky has not accomplished as much writing as Tolstoy because his life was cut short. And I think I need to start my discussion of Brothers Karamazov by saying it's his final novel. So those of you who joined us fairly recently, please remember that my comments start before September 1. So if you want to know more about everything that I have to say about Dostoevsky, please go back to my preliminary notes. And I posted them from August 1 through August 31. And they're extremely helpful in the sense where I go through the entirety of Dostoevsky's life, from his birth in a hospital in Moscow to his death, and the outpouring of grief because Russia has lost its prophetic voice. And it's really fascinating to see how Dostoevsky arrives to this. I always tell my students, this is the sum total of Dostoevsky's writing. Brothers Karamazov is at the very top, and the chapter entitled "The Grand Inquisitor" is at the top of the top. So you will find out why that is so important in part 2. So yes, in order to appreciate what Brothers Karamazov represents, you have to understand the totality of Dostoevsky's writing career. And he was only 60 when he died. So Tolstoy lived to be 82. Dostoevsky died at 60. And the epigraph is phenomenal. We discussed the epigraph. That was my first note. The epigraph also appears on Dostoevsky's tombstone. And it's that statement about the seed of corn. And I'll just read it right now. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except the seed of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. And this inscription appears on Dostoevsky's tombstone. It mattered to him that much. And the fact that we are discussing his work right now across time zones, across languages, is a testament to the prophetic nature of that statement. He planted that seed. And without us opening this book, and here's my copy of Brothers Karamazov, there are some notes there. And without us opening this book and reading this book, it's dead. But we are the afterlife of his writing. And so as long as there are people reading his books and discussing his books, and hopefully being infuriated by his books and hopefully loving his books at the same time, that afterlife continues. And he was fully cognizant of the fact that the afterlife of a book is all up to the readers. His fate as a writer now rests in our hands. And I think we're doing a fine job valuing Dostoevsky's writing. So the epigraph is from John. And of course, the dedication is to Anna Grigorievna Snitkina. And I did write about their collaboration starting with the novel, The Gambler. The story of the publication of The Gambler is phenomenal. And I wrote about it in my preliminary notes. But they meet and he dictates this novel to her and he wins this incredible publishing gamble that he took on with the writing of the novel, The Gambler. And Anna Grigorievna becomes his wife, his helpmate, his muse, his lover, the keeper of his home, and also his publisher. And she was the one who finally helped him to overcome his gambling addiction, which lasted for 5 years, first 5 years of their marriage. He gambled away her wedding ring. So no, these books were not written by a person who by any stretch of imagination could be called a saint, but perhaps that's why he was accepting of the vastness of our humanity, precisely because he was such a flawed human being. And he was fully aware that he's hopeless. I mean, his proposal to Anna Grigorievna was stunning. He just said, you know, I'm writing this novel about an older artist. He's sick, he's miserable, he's unsuccessful, he's just a no good bum. And he falls in love with a young woman. Do you think such a plot twist would be possible? And her answer was remarkable. She said, I just want you to know that I love you and I will love you all my life. And she did. She was 34 when she was widowed, and she lived to be 72, and she was the keeper of the flame. I mean, all of the early museum work and archival work that was done on behalf of Dostoevsky's legacy was done by Anna Grigorievna. And so the final novels, The Idiot, demons, the adolescent, and brothers Karamazov were dictated to her. So can you imagine being Anna Grigorievna Snitkina and being on the receiving end of the monastery scene where Fyodor Karamazov goes from, I'm Fyodor. I'm just going to poke a little fun at all of these people because it's so easy to poke fun at them, to just collapse and collapse and collapse. And then you get to the end of the chapter and you think it can't get any worse. And then, of course, he has to come back. Of course, he just has to just completely blow the whole thing up. And so can you imagine being the wife, taking dictation, and Dostoevsky actually acting out all of these scenes in front of her? So here is the biggest difference between Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. And George Steiner stresses this throughout his book. Tolstoy wrote epic novels. Dostoevsky wrote dramatic novels. So if Tolstoy is inheriting the mantle of the epic genre, Dostoevsky is writing in the tradition of Shakespeare. And if Tolstoy absolutely despised Shakespeare, Dostoevsky loved Shakespeare to the point where when I'm teaching his novel Demons, I always tell my students, in order to fully understand what Dostoevsky is attempting to accomplish here, you really need to familiarize yourself with the plot of at least 5 Shakespeare plays. In Demons, there's a character whose name is Prince Hal. Of course, that's from Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2. There's a character who is very much, though, a Falstaff-like character, and Falstaff has been an inspiration for several characters in Dostoevsky, including Fyodor Karamazov, but also General Ivolgin and the Idiot. And then you have to know the plot of Hamlet. One of the characters in Demons says, your problem was that you never had your Horatio. And in order to understand what happens in the life of that character, you have to understand what Horatio meant for Hamlet. And then there's a character who at one point at the end of the novel is found wandering in the storm in a field, clutching an umbrella and a plaid blanket. And of course, it's King Lear. And so Dostoevsky is a dramatic writer. And just from Part 1, you realize that he creates drama on a massive scale. He loves to put all of his characters into one small space. The tighter, the better. And then he just lets it rip. And he will unleash his characters on each other. They're going to act completely consistently with their personalities. So Fyodor will always be Fyodor, and Alyosha will always be Alyosha. And poor Alyosha is on the receiving end of his family's madness, but he too is a Karamazov. And so Dostoevsky loves to have drama just unfold in front of us, the readers. And it's a breathtaking experience. The way I am following in the novel is I found a fabulous audible recording in Russian. And so I'm listening to the novel in Russian, and then I'm looking at the Pavir and Malachonsky translation as I listen in Russian. I offer very little commentary on the translation. I did it once with Fyodor because his speech is untranslatable. So those of you who are wondering about Fyodor Karamazov, I think the biggest question is, why this character, and why do we despise him so much, but why is he so absolutely delightfully fascinating? He's the most interesting character in the book. And so Dostoevsky at this point, his career as a writer has been established. I suppose the major works that he has written so far are Notes from the Dead House, Crime and Punishment, and The Idiot, and also Demons. So he's resting on his laurels at this point. And I really feel that in Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky just said to himself, you know what, I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to have so much fun, and I'm going to have fun with this character. Fyodor Karamazov is the funniest character Dostoevsky has ever created. And the fact that he created this buffoon who is so unappealing, kudos to Dostoevsky. He is just having fun, and he is messing with us. It's like every single chapter, I just sort of have this feeling like he's smirking at me. He's just like, he's loving the fact that I'm infuriated with him. And we have this dialogue with Dostoevsky in every single chapter. He's infuriating, and we love him. And he's making us think, and he's making us fight him. And we know that we're going to lose the fight because he presents us with arguments that we can't agree with. And yet he constructs arguments that we cannot disregard. And so this is not War and Peace for that reason too. It's not a plot-driven novel or a character-driven novel. It's a concept-driven novel. And we end up arguing not with the characters or with Dostoevsky, but with ourselves. I mean, our biggest argument is this novel with our own perception. And Dostoevsky knows that because he's a genius. He's a master craftsman. He creates characters that infuriate us, and he's loving every second of it. The impossibility of translating Fyodor's speech is so profound. He is so much more hilarious in Russian. Those of you who don't speak Russian, so I always tell my students, there are only two reasons why you need to learn Russian. One, to read Pushkin in the original, because he is untranslatable. And Pushkin's poetry is so sublime in Russian that like any Russian kid can quote. I mean, I can start quoting Pushkin by heart right now because I had a very good Russian literature teacher. But Fyodor's speech is untranslatable. He is funny, he is vulgar, he is explosive, he is irreverent, he is insulting, and he's hilarious because he is so honest. And he's honest about his honesty. He just at one point says, I'm not all about style, I'm all about honesty. And everything, we can't disagree with the things he says, is the way he says all of those things are just so infuriating. And he's also very polemical in his own discussions with himself. That discussion that he had with Iman at some point, where Iman is just promoting his little mantra of everything is permitted. And Fyodor is saying, yeah, you know, I like that. I mean, personally, it works in my life. If everything is permitted, then I'm sinless. And then he says, and you know, like, of course I want to just depose all of those pompous asses in that monastery because they're hoarding all of that gold and silver. And you know, it's completely unused. Like all of that gold and silver, not put to good use. I mean, just it's infuriating. And Iman, who is also polemical with himself, he's saying, yes, but once you deprive them of their stuff, then the next person will be you. And Fyodor at that point says, you know, you're right, what an ass I am. And here's this character who was just calling Smerdyakov an ass the previous chapter, but then he is fully able to be self-critical. And he's saying to Ivan, yeah, you're probably right. And then Ivan is an absolutely infuriating character too. He's smart, he's well-educated, who is poised, he's well-placed, he revolves in the best of circles. What is he doing here? Like, why is he staying with his dad? His dad is why I'm wondering, why is this guy staying with me? Like, what does this kid want? And if there are two, like if there was a father and son duo that would be completely opposite to each other, it would be Iman and Fyodor. So Fyodor does not mind being beaten up by Mita. It's shocking. Like, I'm just, you know, I'm waiting for you to be shocked by the fact that Fyodor is like, nah, you know, it's all in a day's work. He beat me up. I probably deserved it. I'm an ass and he's an ass. And guess what? I recognize my 28-year-old self in Mita. But of course, because Fyodor is Fyodor, he has to add, but you know what? I was more handsome then. So Fyodor understands the passion that is raging in Mita's heart. He doesn't understand the cold rationalism that is infesting Ivan. He doesn't know what Ivan is up to. He doesn't understand what is moving Ivan. And then after that chapter where Smerdyakov is discussing faith and how, you know, we can just twist ourselves into all kinds of intellectual pretzels to get over our commitment to faith in order to then be more faithful. And Fyodor just sees the ludicrousness of Smerdyakov's arguments, and he's asking Smerdyakov, why are you saying all this? Like, where did this come from? And then he realizes, oh my goodness, there's one variable that changed. It's Iman. Smerdyakov is trying to get Iman's attention, but why? And so he discusses this whole Smerdyakov soliloquy with Iman, and Iman is saying, yeah, I understand. I understand that I have an influence on him. He's one of my followers. And Fyodor is like, what followers? What are you talking about? And Ivan says, you know, he's worthless. He's completely useless. He's he's a scumbag. Someday I'll have better followers, but for now, the Smerdyakovs of this world will do. And then we are wondering, what is going on? And what is Iman constructing? And I suppose I have to send you to Dostoevsky's novel Demons to understand what Dostoevsky is attempting to accomplish here. But Dostoevsky is showing us a human being who, at one point in Demons, one of the characters says, I thought that I ate the idea, but the idea ate me. And that's exactly what is happening to Ivan. Ivan is possessed by an idea. And it's fascinating that the novel Demons is sometimes, in Russian, it's Besy. It's sometimes translated as the possessed. Ivan is possessed by an idea, and this idea is the core driving principle of Ivan. So if Mita is possessed of a passion, and that's why the chapter about him is entitled, it has the words ardent heart, ardent soul in it. There's ardor in Mita. He's burning. He's burning with bodily passion. Ivan does not have a bodily passion. Ivan is eaten up by an idea. And so it's fascinating how the three brothers are so different from each other. Ivan is just the cold, logical rationalism. He's the mind. Mita is the passionate body, the body that just constantly keeps nagging and saying, I want. And we can't say no. We just can't say no to the body. Our body is just so completely ludicrously in charge of us all the time. We want to believe that we're in charge of our body, but it's the other way around. And then Alyosha is the soul, the human heart. And he sees goodness in everyone. He does not condemn Fyodor. And it's fascinating when Mita has that long outpouring of his ardent heart in the gazebo over cognac while he is chanting Schiller. It's so funny. That family's relationship with Frederick Schiller is hilarious because Fyodor sometimes shows up and says, here, behold, the Moor brothers. And he just starts discussing his boys, and that's just Ivan and Mita as characters from Schiller's The Robbers. And then Mita is sitting in the gazebo, like completely drunk and saying, I'm not drunk, I'm just passionate. And he's chanting Schiller's Ode to Joy. I mean, that whole 3-chapter passage was Mita, just his soul has left his body. I mean, and his body is hovering somewhere in cosmic spheres. He is so completely disembodied, and he's allowing his body to sing in place of his soul. It is just a stunning set of chapters. I don't know anything like this in any literary work where a character like Mita is allowed to just pour out everything that is happening inside. But do you remember when he's just like jumping from the top of the fence? He doesn't want to shout because he doesn't want to attract anyone's attention. He just wants to attract Alyosha's attention because he knows that Alyosha, who would not understand, Alyosha does not understand about these yearnings of the body at all. He doesn't want to think about women. He doesn't want to hear about women, but he would not condemn Mita doing so. And so Mita is just like gesticulating to him from the top of the fence because he knows that this kid will sit there and listen to his outpourings and not condemn him. And Alyosha is the same way with Fyodor Karamazov. He says, your head is a little misguided, but your heart is a good one. And so I always tell my students, God, we all wish we would have an Alyosha in our lives. I mean, how many of us need Alyosha right now? Alyosha, we all need him. Not because of any kind of special qualities Alyosha has, but he's accepting of our humanity. He's accepting of human beings being human. And that's just such a gift. That is the gift that he has. So now we discussed the three brothers, Smerdyakov a little bit, and his relationship with Ivan. Please watch that part 2. Just keep watching Ivan and Smerdyakov. And we need to talk about the most important character of part 1, and that's Father Zasima. Oh, what a character. We have no idea why he vows to Mita, and I'm not going to talk about it. Remember, I just refuse to answer your questions, and there's a reason for this, because Dostoevsky will give us answers. But remember, this novel is also serialized. So of course, Katkov, who is just this genius publisher, you have to understand that Katkov was a brilliant business person, and he understood talent. So Katkov, in his 20 years of being the editor of the Russian Messenger, Serialized, among other things. And this is like a short list, right? Turgenev's Fathers and Sons, Tolstoy's War and Peace, and Anna Karenina, and his earlier work, Family Happiness. And then Dostoevsky's earlier work, Village of Stepanchikova, and then Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Idiot, Demons, and Brothers Karamazov. One magazine, one editor. It's remarkable. So he definitely knew how to choose them. And that's why there are so many cliffhanger chapter endings. So just like Charles Dickens and George Eliot were serializing their novels, and it was all the rage. 19th century is all about serializing novels because there was a large reading public at this point, right? I mean, literacy rates were very high, and the middle class expanded, and people could subscribe to magazines. I mean, it's ridiculous. There are all of these stories when all of these literary magazines that were publishing the next installment of Dickens, like Old Curiosity Shop, would be shipped to the US. All of the people from New York would rush to the harbor to be the first ones to get hold of the next installment of a Dickens novel so that they would be able to talk to their friends that evening. Because if you didn't read the next installment of these novels, then you were not a member of civilized community that read books. So yes, that's why the cliffhanger chapter endings, and that's why I always have to tell you, all shall be revealed. I think that will be my standard statement at the end of each one of my posts. Just don't panic, all shall be revealed. But we are very impatient. We want to know more. And the thing is, some of the questions that you've asked in the past 25 days will not be answered till December 10th. That's just how it is. If you rush ahead and read the last page of Brothers Karamazov right now, you will basically say, what? Why? It will make absolutely no sense. Completely zero sense, unless you read the entire novel. So it's not like The Tale of Two Cities. You find out what happens on the last page and you're like, okay, that makes sense. In Brothers Karamazov, it's flabbergasting. It's one of those completely unexpected twists that you could not have anticipated. And it seems like what is Dostoevsky doing? But he knows precisely what he's doing, and will understand that fully. And Zasima is our guide. Zasima is just the perfect human being who lives for other human beings. And do you remember I was actually stunned by that chapter where we have Father Ferapont, Father Paisi, and Father Zasima, or Elder Zasima, in one chapter. And they present such very different ideas about Christianity. So I actually messaged the priest in the Orthodox Church in Iowa City. And I said, Father Ignatius, I have to confess, I've been practicing without a license. And I'm flailing at this point. I need to have your input in this discussion. And so he had a wonderful half-hour conversation with me on Friday, and that really, really helped. And I realized, well, one, I'm on the right track, and two, it was just amazing to have Father Ignatius just explain some of the points about these characters. Some of you are wondering where his comment is. It's an answer to the first comment of that note that I wrote that has the photograph of the actual Father Ambrose or Elder Ambrose, Starец Ambrosi. So find the photograph of the actual elder who inspired Zasima, read the first question, and Father Ignatius posted his comment as an answer to the first question. So several of you asked the question of where you could find that. But basically, he said that Dostoevsky is a very traditional Eastern Christian writer at this point in his life. And those of you who read my preliminary comments, you understand what happened to him in Siberia. He has the most shocking life of any author. He was sentenced to death by the firing squad at 28. And he stood and looked at the barrels of the guns for half an hour, knowing full well that he's going to die. And then that sentence was commuted to life in Siberia, hard labor. And when he ended up in Siberia, he thought that it will be for life. And at one point, I made a comment to somebody's comment what happened to him. And he actually described this experience when he was writing in his writer's diary. He said that one day he woke up at the top bunk and he looked at all of these convicts, and some of their faces were branded because they committed so many murders, they could not be rehabilitated. And so here he is, you know, a published author, a college graduate, and a commissioned officer is all of a sudden in the same barrack with murderers, and they murder each other for food. I mean, these people seem to have no conscience at all whatsoever. And yet Dostoevsky is there with them. And so one day he looked down at them and he remembered this incident from his childhood where he was running through a field and all of a sudden he heard the shouts, a wolf, a wolf. And he was terrified. He froze. And this peasant who lived on the estate, Marie, came up to him and he said, there, what's all the fuss? And he comforted the child. And Dostoevsky remembered that his lips were trembling. He was so frightened. And Marie had dirt-stained fingernail, and he put his finger on the child's trembling lips. And he said, it's all okay. Everything will be fine. I mean, he had almost this maternal kindness towards the child who was frightened. And it comforted the young Dostoevsky tremendously. And then all of a sudden, he looked at all of the people around him and he said, how can I judge them? I cannot peer into their hearts. Who knows? Maybe one of these unfortunates was a branded face, screaming vulgar songs. Maybe he is that very peasant Marie who comforted me as a child. We are all in this together. So do you see where Father Zasima says in his one of the final sermons that he makes at the end of part 1, he says, we all suffer for each other. We bear the collective guilt of our humanity, but we cannot offer collective salvation. And that is the most important thing to remember about Father Zasima. He does not believe that humanity can be saved as an entity. That's kind of fool's errand. I mean, remember Madame Khokhlakova, who's also a very important character. She's one passionate widow. She's in her early 30s, and oh my goodness, her heart is racing all the time. She is just so incredibly passionate about things, and she just wants to save humanity. And that's why I offered that comment a couple of days ago, that Father Zasima told her to live a life of active love. And it's amazing. She is living the most actively loving life. She has a daughter who's in a wheelchair, and they argue beautifully. I mean, their mother-daughter relationship is hilarious. They argue about doors, lint. They argue about absolutely everything. I mean, if you ever had kids who are that age, it's like you can never communicate with them. It's just absolutely remarkable. And at some point, boom, and this happens, and it's delightful. But they're arguing about everything all the time. And she says to Father Zasima, I want to be an angel of mercy. I want to become a nurse. I want to save humanity. And Father Zasima tells her, no, just calm down. All you can offer is care for one human life. And that's when he says, you know, human beings are impossible to love because they blow their noses and slurp their food. And they're unbearable. Every single one of us is totally unbearable. But that's Father Zasima's all-embracing message of love, that all of us are acceptable on some level. And it's fascinating that Father Ignatius said this to me, that the fact that God was incarnate in Jesus Christ and walked among us is the proof that there is something redeeming about every single one of us. And that is sort of the core, the essence of Eastern Christianity, that every single human being is redeemable. That's why Father Zasima does not want ecclesiastical law to be administered in the court system, because he's basically saying to Iman, I mean, what do we do with people who are condemned by the state? Where do they go to still redeem their own humanity? And Zasima feels every single human being is redeemable because we have the free choice to repent. And he listens to that woman and he seals her lips. She starts talking about her husband, and we will never know what she said to Zasima, because he felt that her confession is for his ears only. But there are two questions he asks her. Did you go to confession? She said, yes. And he said, did you take communion? Or were you admitted to communion? And she said, yes. And at that point, he says, and then just repent earnestly in your heart, and your redemption is possible. And Dostoevsky believed in resurrection of the human being, because guess what? He was that resurrected sinner. I mean, the core of Crime and Punishment is the story of Lazarus, the resurrection of a human being past death. And for Dostoevsky, physical death and spiritual death are both these forms of the disappearance of the human soul, the human heart, that needs to be addressed, that need to be addressed. And so for Dostoevsky, the death of the soul is something that absolutely terrifies him. And yet in Crime and Punishment, he has a character who kills his own soul. And the story of Lazarus is so very, very important in that novel. And I suppose I will end my soliloquy just by mentioning the other parables that are so important in those 5 last novels. Resurrection of Lazarus and Crime and Punishment. The Idiot deals with that Saturday between Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday. And it's in so many ways, it's a retelling of the last book of the New Testament of Revelation. One of the characters actually introduces himself as, I'm an interpreter of the apocalypse. So that's the Idiot. Demons deals with the demoniac who was infested with demons. And Dostoevsky says that these demons for him are these ideas that infested Russia in the 1860s, 1870s. Christ exorcises the demons, puts them into swine, the swine rush off the cliff, and the demoniac sits at the feet of Christ completely back in his own mind. And then the Adolescent is an odd novel. I just reread it this summer. I loved it. It's very different from these 5 enormous ones that we know so much better. But it deals with what Dostoevsky calls in Russian благочестие, seemliness, love of goodliness. Just where have we lost that ability to be seemly and good of our own free will? And there's a character in The Adolescent who's 19, who is seeking this goodness in people and finding it so hard to discover it. And then, of course, Brothers Karamazov, it's the wedding at Cana. One of the chapters that you will be reading soon, I think it's in part 3, actually deals with the wedding at Cana. It's the first miracle of Christ, turning water into wine. And we will be discussing that very, very soon. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Those are my sort of additional comments to my endless outpourings. And I will let John first read all of the questions that were posted on the chat.
All right, well, all of the questions is actually one right now, so
Okay.
we can spend a little time with that. But if folks have other questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we can share them. David Dewar asks, although they haven't played a major role in the novel so far, I'm fascinated by the female characters, Katenka, Grushenka, and even Lise.
Mhm.
They seem to me pleasantly well-rounded and empowered characters given the world of the 1880s. Is that a fair evaluation? I wonder if Dostoevsky's relationship with Anna influenced that fairly liberated view of women.
No, all of his relationship with all of the women he encountered. I mean, he knew how to choose them. He only had relationships with women who were on fire. I mean, his girlfriend that he had, Apollinaria Suslova, she was an anarchist, and she was openly talking about like revolutionary upheaval and blowing things up. And she was young and attractive, and he is past his Siberia years. And if he would have met her in his 20s, she would have influenced him into much more profound revolutionary activity. But at this point, he was just sort of torn between his physical attraction to her and his bewilderment with her ideas. And the fact that he offered proposed marriage to her after his wife died, and she said no. I think that was the nicest thing that could have happened to Dostoevsky, because if his first marriage was a catastrophe, the second marriage would have been a catastrophe. The women, I offered just one remark on the women, and I just sort of wrote a summary paragraph saying that Dostoevsky female characters are an event in a reader's life. Russian women characters are an event in readers' lives. So novel like Fathers and Sons. There are 4 women characters in it. And seemingly, students often say, why does it have to be fathers and sons? Why can't it be mothers and daughters? And the mistranslation of that title is really messing up its reputation in the English-speaking world. The novel title in Russian actually means the progenitor and the progenitors and the progeny. Can you imagine selling a book like that? No, it's about intergenerational infighting, the constant intergenerational infighting. So Отцы и дети means the progenitors and the progeny in Russian. The women characters in that novel are astonishing, especially this woman whose name is Anna Odintsova. And she influenced all of these women that came after her. And she comes before the Tolstoy fabulous heroines in War and Peace and in Anna Karenina, and she comes before all of the Dostoevsky women. And it's fascinating how Dostoevsky's novel that lies in the foundation of the Great Five, Notes from Underground, is actually a response to Turgenev. So Anna Odintsova is magnificent. She's absolutely magnificent. And the main character of the novel, he is a nihilist. And he basically says, well, we just have to sweep everything off, and after us, things that will happen after us are bound to be better than what we are sweeping away. And she just asks him a very simple question. In this beautiful new world that you proposed, there'll be no more angry, jealous people? And she destroys his arguments. I mean, she's just saying that in your perfect world, how will you reform human beings to adhere to your perfect ideas? So do you see that this argument, this simple 2-line argument between 2 characters and fathers and sons, becomes the foundation of everything that Dostoevsky creates in his Great Five novels. And so, yes, we have Dostoevsky ladies. So it's remarkable to what extent Dostoevsky never puts women into a damsel in distress category. They do not need to have advocacy from men. They do not define themselves through men. They are agents of their own free will destruction. And it's amazing. I mean, Dostoevsky really feels that we are endowed with free will. And he feels that he knows we misuse it. You know, I should have been eating some carrots before my discussion with you. And instead I had coffee, and then I ate some Russian condensed milk that my mother got for me in a Russian grocery store. And I should have been eating carrots and celery, but I was not. And so it was a totally free will choice, because I have tomatoes and cucumbers available, but I went for the condensed milk. Guilty as charged. It has been my obsession since childhood. But there's this sense in Dostoevsky that women are incredibly powerful human beings, and they do not need to be defined through their relationship with men, and they do not need to be rescued in any way, shape, or form. Dostoevsky feels that children are very different in that regard. And so you all of a sudden meet all of these odd schoolboys in part 2, and you're wondering, schoolboys, like, why? Why do we have a whole gaggle of schoolboys in this novel? I shall say no more, because you need to you need to acquaint yourselves with these schoolboys. But Dostoevsky really will ask many questions about subversion of young minds, because these ideas are so incredibly powerfully penetrating. And how do young minds react to ideas? He doesn't concern himself with women and ideas. You know, he feels that if women want to pick up these ideas and blow up the world, more power to them. They have free will. They are free will agents. And if a woman wants to just destroy everything around her, just, you know, complete destruction of the universe around her, that's fine. And if she's doing it out of spite, that's great too, because she's an agent of free will. I'm pretty much giving away the plot of the novel, The Idiot. Yes, so Dostoevsky women characters are an event in every reader's life, because they are so autonomous and so incredibly powerful. And that we just have one chapter where Grusha and Katya basically they're testing each other's will, right? Grusha is just really enjoying Katerina fussing over her. And Katerina, she thinks that she can control human beings. She's a very proud woman, and she She feels that she has the ability to make decisions for other people. She can control people's emotions, she thinks, and she's mistaken so tremendously. And Grushenka loves the fact that Katerina kissed her hands and called her little angel and a little darling. And I mean, the meal they were having, what was it? They were having hot, like liquid chocolate. It's not hot chocolate. Forget about hot chocolate. It's super gooey, like liquid chocolate. It's not cocoa, it's liquid chocolate. And then they were having it with some candy and sweets. Wow. I mean, Dostoevsky is like really insinuating that the sweet discussion is just as disgusting as their sweet meal. It's not good for you. Like, your digestive system cannot handle a meal like that. And their moral system, their emotional system cannot handle that encounter. And then Grushenka triumphs over Katerina, and Katerina is in hysterics. And, sorry, rushing ahead, but we're headed into another hysterics precisely for the same reason. She thinks she can control human beings. She can control human emotions, and that's a fool's errand.
All right, well, I'll jump in here, Anna, because we have more questions. So
okay, awesome.
We'll ask them. The first one, Linda Dunn asks, I'm curious why Dostoevsky was in good standing with the church and Tolstoy was not.
So do you have like, I don't know, a couple of days? I have to catch a flight in the morning, so we can just talk until like 5 a.m. And so Dostoevsky accepted that we as human beings are flawed. And Tolstoy could not accept that. Tolstoy felt that we are reformable. Dostoevsky felt that the reformation of human beings on a massive scale will result in slaughter. That's why Dostoevsky was considered a prophet, because especially if you look at Dostoevsky's writing through the prism of the 20th century, where people were murdered for the sake of ideas. You see to what extent he predicted the possibility of this happening, not because he was a prophet, but because he understood what human beings are capable of. And so Tolstoy rejected the Christian church. I mean, Tolstoy went as far as learning Greek in order to read the New Testament in the original, and then he would argue with scholars and saying, well, but could this word mean actually something else? He not only disagreed with the church, he disagreed with the books that were the foundation of the church. And also he could not accept the Eucharist. He could not accept communion. He could not accept the mystery of the church. He did not accept the miracles. You know, he rewrote the New Testament for himself. I mean, he's in a very good category because Thomas Jefferson did the same thing too. But Tolstoy took out all of the references to miracles. And do you see how I mentioned all of the plot elements of the 5 novels? A lot of them deal with the miracles of Christ. For Dostoevsky, the miracles are the essence of the faith. Tolstoy could not accept them. He wanted understanding. I always jokingly say to my students, Tolstoy would have been a fabulous Protestant. He actually should have just converted to Protestantism because he would have been very happy there. But Eastern Christianity is very mystical, and it's very majestic, and it's very mystical. And Dostoevsky accepted the mystery of it. For him, the mystery of Christ's love and forgiveness was paramount to everything that he thought. So Tolstoy, in one of his late novels, actually mocked the act of communion. He actually talked about sort of the cannibalistic aspects of it. And that's when the church finally said, we've had enough. And they excommunicated him when he was 72. And when he died, the family could not get a Christian burial for him. I visited Tolstoy's tomb 5 times, or his grave, 5 times in 5 years, to just come to terms with what this man did and where his thinking led him. And there will be never a cross on his grave. The Russian Orthodox Church will never readmit Tolstoy. He just sinned a little too much against the foundations of the faith. Dostoevsky, on the other hand, accepted it, and he accepted the majesty and the mystery of it. And so the wedding at Cana is coming. I mean, this whole novel is the foundation of the novel is precisely what happens at the wedding at Cana, the first miracle of Christ.
All right. I fear that you won't answer this one, but maybe the answer will come later. Patty
Okay.
asks, who is the narrator? Is it someone who lives in their village?
Yes, it's a small town. The town's name is Skotopriganevsk, which is hilarious. It's like the place where you herd cattle. That's what the name of the town means. Dostoevsky is just having fun. He has two novels that are set in provincial towns. It's Demons and Brothers Karamazov. And he wanted to have these novels set not in St. Petersburg, because in St. Petersburg, exciting things happen all the time, right? So you would not notice the next exciting thing because newspapers are just full of all kinds of exciting things that happen, right? But the extraordinary nature of what happens in Demons and in Brothers Karamazov, he had to have it happen in a place where nothing ever happens. Like when you're reading Demons, the first 200 pages, you are really asking yourself, why am I wasting my time? There's nothing happening here. The last 50 pages, you are looking for the break and there's no break. I mean, you are just going to hell in a handbasket super fast, and you are loving it and you are hating it and you can't stop. And then you realize the first 200 pages were preparing you for this, preparing you for the fact that when hell breaks loose, there's just no stopping it. With Brothers Karamazov, he had to have this novel where nothing seemingly happens. I love the way he describes this town. There are just these endless streets and they meander, and then there are these endless gardens and they're deserted, and there are neighbors, and you can climb over these fences to take shortcuts, and then you can like be a part of your neighbors' lives while you are crossing their yard. It's fascinating. And the narrator is a member of this community, but then he is there in chapter 1 and then boom, he's gone. And I always tell my students, Dostoevsky broke every rule in the writer's rule book, every single rule. You know, in The Great Gatsby, we know who the narrator is. It's Nick, and Nick is with us all the way to the end. And it's so understandable and clear. That's not Dostoevsky's way of writing. He introduces a narrator and then he forgets about him because he was useful at the very beginning, and then keep looking for the narrator. It's going to be like a Where's Waldo type of experience. Like every time you find the narrator, just make a comment for that post and say, Anna, the narrator is surfaced. And we'll pat ourselves on the shoulder that we found the narrator again. Also notice that he will be introducing new characters for the rest of the novel. And you just can't do that. You know, you have to have all of your main characters appear in the first 30 pages because the rule is that the reader will be distracted. And prepare to be distracted, dear readers.
All right, we have a couple more questions here. One, Fyodor Pavlovich has the same given name as the author. Was he trying to say something using his own name for a strange, essentially comic character?
There's not another Fyodor in any of Dostoevsky's writing. He never named, as far as I can tell. You know, those of you who find another Fyodor, and I reread pretty much all the big works this summer. If somebody knows of another Fyodor in any of Dostoevsky's writing, let me know. As far as I can tell, this is the only Fyodor. And Dostoevsky gave his boldest, wildest creation his first name. In so many ways, just saying, you know, I'm having fun with him. I'm just having so much fun with this absurd, but can we call Fyodor Pavlovich good-natured? I can't. He's awful. He's absolutely awful, but we laugh at him. Do you see what Dostoevsky is doing? He does something very similar in Crime and Punishment. The first book of Crime and Punishment, I mean, I'm not going to give away too much because it's like the first 70 pages. There's a murder in it. The very beginning of the book. By the way, those of you who are Columbo fans, every episode of Columbo is structured like Crime and Punishment. It's like true fact. The writers of Columbo structured every episode like Crime and Punishment, but the crime happens first, and then the revelation happens for the rest of the film or episode or in Crime and Punishment. But all through that book one, we want the murderer to succeed. He creates a narrative that makes us empathize with the murderer. And then we get to the end of part one and we are horrified because we realize that we were on the edge of our seat wanting the murderer to succeed. And in so many ways, we are intellectually complicit in that crime. And so then the 500 pages that follow, the punishment, is extremely elucidating for us as readers, because in so many ways, we have to go through the thought process of having to come to terms with how we related to this murder. It's the same with Fyodor Karamazov. He creates the most appalling character, and we can't get enough of him. I mean, we want him to come back to that monastery. We want that final scene. And, it's just so incredibly gratifying when he just completely falls apart to the end. And even when he's beaten up by Mita and he goes to the mirror and he's so vain, he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's just saying, oh, now if Grushenka comes, like, look at my face. I mean, my God, it's like without being beaten up, his face is pretty unappealing, to say the least. But, he's just worried about those 2 bruises. I mean, how will women relate to him with the 2 bruises on his face? It's awful. The whole scene is awful, but we're laughing. And Dostoevsky he's strumming the strings of our human hearts. He's just saying, he too is human. And I actually saw a question that appeared that I can answer right now. Would Father Zasima forgive Tolstoy? Absolutely. Tolstoy is a great, great sinner. All of us are great sinners. And, Zasima is there to just basically say, hey, I've been there, done that. Remember, we know that Zasima at one point was an army officer. I mean, do you understand what it means to be a Russian Imperial Army officer? Mita is a fabulous example. I mean, do you remember when Katerina gives him back, how much? So he gives her, he gives her 5, she needs 4.5. She trades in the promissory note, so she gives him 200 back. I mean, like that whole chapter, like, did you keep track of all of that money? And then he immediately has a debauch. I mean, he can't keep money. And then of course she returns the money to him, and somebody, so many of you ask, like, what happened to that money? Are you kidding me? He is a Russian army officer. He drinks, he womanizes, he's awful. And just think, Father Zasima knows what Mita is, not because he has a good heart, but because he is in so many ways, or he was in so many ways, what Mita is today. So it's, you don't become a holy man just by sitting on mountaintops and thinking deep thoughts. I mean, Zasima is a very, very special human being, and we will, I shall say no more.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of our hour here, but we have one last question that I will pose to you. Jean Rude asks, please comment on the Oedipal myth related to Ivan and Fyodor. Right. And what about the comment of Ivan's? It seems to suggest everyone has murder and even patricide in their heart. So we'll end with a lighthearted one here.
Oh, the lighthearted one. Well, I mentioned at the very, very beginning of my comments, and we find out in chapter 1 that Fyodor is going to die. We don't know the details yet. So, it's gratifying to all of us who are pure at heart to think that this awful human being is going to be punished and it'll serve him right. Do you see what Dostoevsky is doing here again? I mean, like, he's making us complicit into wanting this horrible character to disappear. But it also is about the loss of patrimony. So the whole issue that Dostoevsky is creating here is very, very complex, because just think of Alyosha. He has 3 fathers. Fyodor as the father who fathered him, Grigory as the father without whom he wouldn't have survived past infancy, and then Zasima, who is his spiritual father. And it's fascinating how Father Paisi, when he all of a sudden becomes his friend, he says, now go, orphan. And it's stunning. Like, why is he calling him an orphan? So yes, he's partly an orphan. His mother died a long time ago. And I love the fact that Grigory is the one who made the tombstone for her. And he actually chose the inscription for her tombstone. I mean, like, I love Grigory so much. He is as Old Testament biblical as it gets. I mean, I can just see him walking around and pounding his fist on the Bible every single day, 3 times a day. But Grigory has he has this incredible solidity about him. So who is really Alyosha's father? Is it Fyodor? And he forgives him for being Fyodor. Is it Grigory? Without him, Alyosha wouldn't have survived. And then he has no male influence in his life at all. He's raised by all of these women. And then all of a sudden he just shows up and attaches himself to Father Zasima, who becomes his spiritual father. So this is a question that we'll continue contemplating for the rest of the novel. because remember, Mita strikes Grigori because Grigori is trying to protect Fyodor. And Mita strikes Grigori, and Grigori is stunned by that. He says, me? You hit me? I used to wash you in a little tub. Fyodor Karamazov never washed that little baby in a little tub. Grigori did. So the complexity of fatherhood and patrimony, not just the inheritance, because there's so much talk right now about the inheritance, like the physical inheritance of the money, but what it means to have paternity, to pass on a legacy. What is the Karamazov legacy? And you should always remember that everyone keeps telling Alyosha, you too are a Karamazov. Alyosha bears that Karamazov essence in his soul. So a very enigmatic answer to end our open-ended discussion of part one. And so many of you want to rush ahead, and please don't. Thank you, Dostoevsky. You know, I didn't know how this is going to proceed. And then I think on day 5 or 6, when everybody was asking, well, how do I connect? You know, I'm reading a different translation. I just thought, you know, this is infuriating. I'm just going to lead the whole group. And everybody's reading different translations, and a lot of people are reading in Russian. And I just thought, okay, let me count the number of chapters. And there are about 100. So there'll be 2 chapters that I'll divide into several sections because they are just imponderable. And one of them is entitled The Grand Inquisitor, and the other one is entitled The Onion. And so remember, every time onions and dogs mentioned in Brothers Karamazov, please pay attention. Onions and dogs are essential for understanding how the novel ends. And that's all I'm going to say.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Anna. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I did just drop into the chat the link to the webpage for the Iowa City Book Festival, which begins on October 17th. And actually our first event is a film related to the Brothers Karamazov. Anna has done amazing work putting together with a lot of different partners, a lot of different programs and activities that are related to this that will be part of the book festival. I won't take all of your time here to enumerate them, but I would encourage you to check that out. And if you're in Iowa City, please join us. Some of the events will be in person. Nearly everything we do will be virtual. So for those who are not in Iowa City, you can join us for most everything, and they're all free. So thank you again for joining us. We will be having future sessions with the future parts of the book with Anna, and we will have all of those listed on Facebook as we get them set. So thank you again and enjoy your evening.
Bye-bye.